It was late September in the year 2025. The room was windowless, painted in a soft neutral grey that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The air inside was cool, regulated by a silent ventilation system that kept the temperature constant at 22 degrees Celsius. There was a smell here, faint but distinct. It smelled of graphite dust, cheap paper, and the sharp metallic scent of intense human focus. 3 people sat at separate desks. The desks were arranged in a triangle, facing away from each other to prevent any accidental glances. This was the training room of the future forecasting group. To an outsider, it might have looked like a boring school exam, but the atmosphere was heavy charged with a silent energy that felt like the pressure in the air right before a thunderstorm breaks. The only sound in the room was the scratching of pencils on paper. Scritch, scratch, pause, scritch. Edward sat at the desk nearest the door. He was an older man with white hair and a face lined by years of deep concentration. His eyes were closed. His breathing was slow and rhythmic. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds. He was not sleeping, he was hunting. On the paper in front of him, his hand moved with a jerky, rapid motion. He was not trying to draw a pretty picture. He was trying to capture a signal. His pencil dug into the paper, creating dark, heavy lines. He drew a vertical line, then another, then a crossbar. Structure, Edward whispered, his voice barely audible. Tall, metal, cold to the touch. To his left sat Nim. She was younger, perhaps in her early 30s. She did not move as much as Edward. She sat completely still, her hands resting flat on the table, palms down. She was waiting for the image to settle in her mind. In the world of remote viewing, rushing was the enemy. If you tried too hard to guess what you were seeing, your imagination would take over. The goal was not to imagine, the goal was to receive. Finally, Nim's hand moved. She picked up her charcoal stick. Unlike Edward's sharp lines, her drawing was soft and round. She drew a curve, then a series of jagged shapes near the bottom of the page. She frowned, keeping her eyes closed tight. Biological, she murmured. Many lives, not modern, old, very old. She sketched shapes that looked like stick figures, but they were simpler, more primitive. They looked like the drawings found on the walls of ancient caves. Red ochre, firelight, shadows dancing on stone. Why was she seeing this? The target for this session was supposed to be a location of strategic importance in the present day. Why was her mind showing her something from 10,000 years ago? The third member, Dick, was the most restless. He tapped his foot silently against the carpeted floor. Dick was known for his speed. He could open his mind, grab a data packet, and close the connection in seconds. Today, however, he was struggling. He drew a circle. Then he crossed it out. He drew a square. He crumpled the paper and tossed it to the floor. He took a fresh sheet. This time he let his hand go loose, bypassing his conscious brain. His hand drew a series of loops spiraling upward. Energy, Dick wrote on the side of the paper. Radiating, broadcasting. The sketch began to look like a complex array of antennas, wire grids stretching up toward a blank sky. It looked technological, yet strangely organic, like a metal forest growing out of the ground. What they were doing in this room was often misunderstood. For decades, people called it extrasensory perception or magic. They thought it was about crystal balls and fortune tellers. But the future forecasting group did not believe in magic. To them, this was a natural human ability as normal as walking or speaking. It was simply a muscle that most people had forgotten how to use. They called it remote viewing. The concept was based on a simple idea: consciousness is not trapped inside the physical skull. The mind is not just a computer made of meat. Instead, consciousness is a field like a magnetic field or a gravity field. It extends beyond the body. It exists everywhere at once. In physics, this is often discussed in terms of non-locality. 2 particles separated by millions of miles can react to each other instantly. If matter can do this, why not the mind? In this room, space and time were not barriers. They were just coordinates. Edward opened his eyes. He looked at his drawing of the tall metal structure. He felt a physical sensation in his body, a technique known as somatic feedback. His chest felt tight. His ears were ringing with a high-pitched sound, a frequency that wasn't actually in the room. "It is loud," Edward said, breaking the silence, "but not a sound you hear with ears. It is a sound you feel in your teeth." Nim opened her eyes as well. She looked at her cave drawings, then she looked at Edward's metal tower. They seemed completely different. One was high technology, the other was ancient history. In a normal situation, they would think one of them was wrong, but they were trained to trust the data. "I get a sense of observation," Nim said softly. "I see people looking up, worshipping or maybe fearing. They are small, the object is huge." Dick stopped tapping his foot. He looked at his spiral antenna drawing. "I have a connection," he said. "The object is sending something out. It is not just standing there. It is active." The monitor, a woman named Sarah who sat in the corner of the room, spoke for the first time. Her job was to guide them to keep them on track without giving them any clues. "Describe the texture," she instructed calmly. "Soothe," David said immediately. "Glass and steel." "Rough," Nim countered, "rock and dust." "Electric," Dick added in, buzzing vibration. It seemed contradictory, but that was the nature of the room. They were like three blind men touching an elephant. One touches the trunk and says it is a snake. One touches the leg and says it is a tree. One touches the ear and says it is a fan. They were all wrong, but they were all right. They were just perceiving different layers of the same reality. Nim closed her eyes again. She tried to push away the visual image of the cave painting and focus on the feeling. She drifted into the black void behind her eyelids. This was the signal line. It was a mental state where the noise of her own thoughts, what she wanted for dinner, her worry about the rent, the itch on her arm faded away. In that silence, the external data could flow in. She felt a wave of heat, not fire, but radiation. It was dry and invisible. "Location," Nim said. "It is dry, arid. No trees, just horizon." "Desert," Edward agreed, nodding. He began to shade the bottom of his metal tower. "Sand. Lots of sand." "Nevada, Arizona," Dick guessed, breaking the protocol. "Do not guess," Sarah the monitor corrected him, gentle but firmly. "Just report the raw data. Nouns require analysis, adjectives are pure data." Dick sighed and went back to sketching. He drew the sky. It wasn't empty. He drew wavy lines coming down from the top of the paper. "Interference," he mumbled. "Something is blocking the view. It's like looking through dirty water." The clock on the wall ticked. It was the only mechanical sound. The training session had been running for 45 minutes. Usually by this time the viewers would be exhausted. Remote viewing burned a lot of glucose. The brain consumed 20% of the body's energy in a normal state. In this state it consumed much more. They could feel the hunger rising, the blood sugar dropping. But today the target was strong, it was calling to them. Edward looked at Nim's drawing again. "Why cave paintings, Nim?" he asked technically. Breaking silence, but the session was peaking. "I don't know," she admitted. "I see the metal tower you see, but I see it through the eyes of memory. Like the land itself remembers something from a long time ago, or maybe..." She paused, tapping her charcoal on the table. "Maybe the thing we are looking at is both, old and new." "A cycle," Dick suggested, history repeating itself. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The distinct smell of ozone seemed to grow stronger. The drawings were becoming more detailed. Edward's tower now had a base, a complex platform. Dick's antennas were connected to a central hub. Nim's primitive figures were standing in a circle around the base of the structure. 3 different minds, 3 different perspectives, one target. They were slowly pulling a hidden truth out of the ether and pinning it down onto paper. It was not magic. It was the hard work of the being human. It was the ability to close your eyes and see the world as it truly was, stripped of distance and time. "Okay," Sarah said, checking her stopwatch. "Let's take a break. Put your pencils down, disconnect from the signal line." They exhaled in unison, a collective release of breath. The tension left their shoulders. They were back in the grey room. Back in September 2025, but on the paper in front of them, the strange, impossible shapes remained staring back at them like a riddle waiting to be solved. Far beyond the warm yellow light of the study room, far beyond the roof of the house, and even beyond the thin layer of blue atmosphere that hugs the earth, there is only silence. It is a silence so deep and so old that it feels like a heavy blanket. Here in the vast space between the stars, the sunlight is not warm. It is just a sharp, tiny point of light in a sea of velvet darkness. In this freezing emptiness, something was moving. It tumbled end over end, spinning slowly as it travelled. To the eyes of the astronomers on Earth, it looked like a long, dark rock. It was shaped like a cigar or a needle tumbling through the dark. They gave it a name, a label, to file away in their database's 3i Atlas. To the scientists looking through their giant glass lenses and reading data on computer screens, Atlas was a puzzle, but a physical one. They measured its speed. They calculated that it was moving at nearly 200,000 miles per hour. They measured its brightness, or rather, its lack of brightness. It was dark red, the colour of old rust, and dried blood battered by cosmic rays for millions of years. They argued about what it was made of. Some said it was a chunk of hydrogen ice. Others said it was just a strange asteroid ejected from a dying star system long ago. They looked for tails of gas or dust, the usual signs of a comet, but they found very little. To them it was dead. It was just a stone skipping across the surface of the vast cosmic ocean. However, there were others who saw something different. These were not men of science with calculators and charts. These were the listeners, the sensitives, the remote viewers who sat in quiet rooms with their eyes closed. When they focused their minds on that point in the sky, they did not see a cold rock. They felt a hum. It was a low rhythmic vibration that did not make a sound, but instead resonated in the teeth and the bones. To them, 3i Atlas was not dead. It was a shell. It was a container. Inside the frozen crust of the object, shielded from the radiation of the stars, something was sleeping. The object was carrying passengers. They were not creatures of flesh and blood. They had no bodies to freeze, no lungs that needed air. They were the antennae. In the vision of the psychics, these entities appeared like complex geometric patterns of light, folded tightly upon themselves like a sleeping flower waiting for the morning sun. They were forms of pure consciousness, ancient thoughts given structure, riding the rock like travelers on a lonely raft. For eons, Atlas had drifted. It had passed through the great empty deserts between star systems. It had flown through clouds of dust where new stars were being born, and it had skirted the edges of black holes where light itself was swallowed. Through it all, the antennae remained dormant. They were in a state of suspension, a long hibernation where time meant nothing. 1,000,000 years was the same as a single second to them. They were waiting for a specific signal, a specific location where the conditions were right to unfold. The journey was peaceful. There is a majestic beauty in the deep void. It is not empty. It is full of potential. As Atlas spun, its surface would catch the distant light of the Milky Way, shimmering for a moment before plunging back into shadow. It was a lonely traveller, but it was not lost. Its path had been determined long ago, not by gravity alone, but by a purpose that human mathematics could not yet describe. 3i Atlas crossed the invisible boundary of our solar system. The sun began to grow larger in its sky. The warmth increased just a fraction of a degree, but enough. Deep inside the rock, the antennae stirred. This was the destination. This connection was not a new accident. It was a reunion. On Earth, thousands of years ago, primitive humans had looked up at the night sky and felt the same vibration. In the deserts of the southwest, in the caves of Europe, and on the high plateaus of the Andes, they had carved strange shapes into the rock. These petroglyphs showed tall, elongated figures with halos around their heads. They drew spirals that mimic the tumbling path of Atlas. They drew stars connected by lines looking like great nets cast across the heavens. Mainstream archaeologists said these drawings were just dreams or depictions of local gods, or perhaps the result of trances induced by plants. But the truth was simpler and far more profound. The ancient artists were the first receivers. They had felt the approach of the antennae long before the object arrived. Time in the consciousness realm does not flow in a straight line like it does on a clock. The echo of the arrival had rippled backward through time, hitting the minds of those ancient shamans. They drew the visitor from the deep because they knew it was coming. They knew that one day the rock that was not a rock would enter the sea. Now, as Atlas moved past the orbit of the outer planets, gaining speed as it fell toward the sun, the silence of space began to change. It was no longer just a physical silence. It was a pregnant silence, heavy with expectation. The ice on the surface of the object began to sublime, turning directly into gas, creating a faint invisible mist around it. The scientists were confused. The object was accelerating. It was moving faster than gravity alone should allow. They checked their equations. They recalibrated their telescopes. They used words like outgassing and non-gravitational acceleration to explain why the rock was pushing itself. They tried to fit the square peg of this miracle into the round hole of their physics. But the explanation was not in the physics of the rock, it was in the awakening of the passengers. The antennae were stretching. They were beginning to unfurl their energy, pushing against the fabric of space itself, steering their vessel for the final approach. The visitor had arrived from the deep ocean of the night. It brought with it the cold of the void, the silence of the dead stars, and a message that had been waiting to be delivered since before the first human learned to make fire. The long sleep was over. The conversation was about to begin. In the early 1970s, hidden away from the busy streets and the noise of the everyday world, a very special partnership was formed. It was a collaboration that sounded like it belonged in a science fiction novel, yet it was entirely real. This was the beginning of Project Stargate. While history often remembers this as a military operation involving the Central Intelligence Agency or CIA, the true heart of the story beats within the walls of the Stanford Research Institute in California. It was here that the world of hard science met the world of the mystical. The goal was not to build a new weapon or a faster jet. The goal was much more profound and gentle. They wanted to answer a question that has puzzled humanity for thousands of years. Is the human mind trapped inside the brain, or can it travel? The architects of the impossible. The story relies heavily on two brilliant men, Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ. They were not magicians or fortune tellers. They were respected physicists. They worked with lasers and optics, dealing with the concrete laws of the physical universe. However, both Puthoff and Targ shared a deep curiosity about the impossible. They believed that the human mind possessed capabilities that modern science had simply ignored. They approached the CIA not with a promise of spies, but with a proposal for exploration. They wanted to study what they called remote viewing. This was a scientific term for the ability to see places, people, and events that were separated from the viewer by great distances or even by time. To the surprise of many, the government agreed. They provided the funding, but the Stanford Research Institute provided the sanctuary where this magic could be tested. The man who saw without eyes. Every great story needs a hero, and in the chronicles of Project Stargate that figure is often Joseph McMoneagle. Known in the files simply as Remote Viewer Number 1, Joe was not a scientist, he was a soldier with a unique gift, and Joe McMoneagle became the living proof that Puthoff and Targ were looking for. He was a man who could sit in a chair in a quiet room in California and describe with startling accuracy a building or a machine sitting in a hangar on the other side of the world. The relationship between these three men, the two physicists and the viewer, was built on trust. In the early days, the scientific community laughed at them, but inside their laboratory the laughter died away and was replaced by awe. Joe was not guessing, he was experiencing. The Chamber of Silence. To understand the legacy of Stargate, you must imagine the setting of their most famous experiments. The scientists built a special environment to test these abilities. It was often a shielded room. Imagine a room with thick walls designed to block out radio waves, electrical signals, and the noise of the outside world. It was a place of absolute stillness. In this room there were no maps on the walls, there were no windows looking out at the target. There was only a comfortable chair, a pen and paper. The protocol was simple but too strict. Joe or another viewer would sit in the chair. The scientists would give him a set of coordinates. These were just numbers, latitude and longitude written on a piece of paper. The viewer was never told what was at that location. It could be a park in New York, a secret facility in Russia, or a vacation resort in Italy. The viewer would close their eyes and enter a meditative state. This was not about forcing the mind to work hard, it was about letting the mind go quiet. In that deep silence, something miraculous happened. The viewer would begin to see, flying across the world. This is where the story moves from science to the wondrous nature of consciousness. When Joe McMoneagle described his process, he did not talk about looking at a photograph in his mind. He spoke about being there. He described the sensation of his awareness detaching from his physical body. In the quiet of the isolation room, his mind would fly across oceans and continents. He could feel the texture of a wall thousands of miles away. He could sense if it was hot or cold, windy or still. He would open his eyes briefly to draw shapes on the paper, a tall tower here, a round dome there, and then close them again to drift back to the target. One of the most famous demonstrations involved a target that was a secret swimming hole hundreds of miles away. Without ever leaving his chair, the viewer described the water, the specific shape of the concrete, and even the feeling of the sun. When the scientists later drove to the location to verify the drawing, the sketch matched reality almost perfectly. Breaking the chains of space, the true legacy of these experiments was not the military secrets they uncovered. The real treasure was the philosophical breakthrough. Before Stargate, the general belief was that our consciousness is local. That means we are here and everything else is there. We believe that to know what is happening in Paris while we are in Vietnam, we need a phone, a television, or a letter. Puthoff, Targ, and McMoneagle proved something different. They demonstrated that at a deep level there is no here and there. They showed that the mind is non-local. In the realm of consciousness, distance is an illusion. 1,000 miles is the same as 1 meter. The experiments showed that we are all connected to a vast field of information. It is like a giant library that exists everywhere at once. Most of us are too distracted by the noise of daily life to notice it. But in the silence of the Stanford laboratory, the remote viewers learned how to open the door to this library. A story of human potential. Project Stargate ran for over 20 years. Eventually the program was closed and the files were declassified and released to the public. While skeptics still argue about the statistics, those who were there know what they saw. The legacy of Stargate is a reminder of the hidden depth of the human being. It tells us that we are more than just biological machines made of meat and bone. We possess a mind that is capable of transcending physical boundaries. The story of Harold Puthoff, Russell Targ, and Joe McMoneagle is a gentle whisper to history. It suggests that if we can quiet the noise, sit in the stillness, and open our minds, there are no limits to where we can go. We are not isolated individuals living on a lonely planet. We are conscious beings connected to the entire universe. This was the gift they left behind. It was not a weapon of war, but a map of the human soul showing us that we are far more magical than we ever dared to believe. On May the 22nd, 1984, inside the quiet walls of the Monroe Institute, a man named Joe McMoneagle lay in a darkened room. He was known as Remote Viewer Number 1, a psychic spy for the American military. But on this day, his mission was not to look at a Soviet submarine or a hidden weapon factory. On this day, the envelope sealed in front of him contained nothing but a set of coordinates and a specific point in time. He did not know what the target was. He simply cleared his mind and let the darkness take over and followed the numbers. The voice of his monitor, Skip Atwater, guided him softly. "Focus on 40.89 degrees north, 9.55 degrees west," Atwater said. Joe's mind began to drift. He described a landscape that was vast and geometric. He saw a pyramid. But this was not the familiar stone structures of Egypt baking temang under the yellow sun. This was something else entirely. It was massive, sitting inside a gigantic depression in the ground. The colours were wrong. The feeling was wrong. "Go back in time," the monitor instructed. "Go to the time roughly 1 million years BC. Suddenly the image shifted. The dust settled. And Joe McMoneagle found himself standing on the surface of ancient Mars. The scene he described was one of heartbreaking tragic beauty. It was cinematic in its scale, like a movie about the end of the world. He saw huge megalithic walls. He saw pyramids that were not just tombs but shelters. These were not built for glory or for kings, they were built for survival. The environment around them was hostile and dying. He described violent violet storms raging across the horizon, huge clouds of dust that swallowed the light. It was a world that was gasping for its last breath. As Joe's consciousness moved through this ancient landscape, he began to sense the inhabitants. This is where the session turned from a geological survey into a ghost story. He found them inside the massive structures. He saw people, but they were not like us, not exactly. They were very tall and very thin. In his trance, Joe noted that their strange physique was a result of the environment, perhaps low gravity, perhaps a different atmospheric pressure. They were wearing clothes that looked like metallic silk shimmering in the dim light. But it was not their appearance that was most striking, it was their emotion. They were waiting. There is a profound sadness in the idea of a waiting room at the end of the world. These tall, thin figures were huddled in the shadows of their great stone halls. Outside, the atmosphere was stripping away. The protective blanket of their planet was disappearing, leaving them exposed to the cold radiation of space. Their sun was growing harsh. Their water was vanishing. Joe felt their desperation. It was a heavy, crushing feeling. They were an ancient people who had mastered science and architecture, who had built mountains out of stone. Yet they were powerless against the death of their planet. They were essentially ghost-watching their own extinction. They sat in the dim light, talking in hushed tones, or simply standing in silence, hoping that someone or something would return for them. The monitor asked Joe to interact with them to see if he could understand what they were doing. Joe realized they could not see him. He was just a ghost from the future visiting their past, but he could feel their thoughts. They were a philosophical people, he sensed, but now they were a people defined by loss. They were waiting for a vessel. They were waiting for a way out. This image evokes a deep sense of melancholy that resonates with anyone who hears it. It mirrors our own deepest fears on Earth. We look at our own changing climate, our own fragile atmosphere, and we wonder if one day we too will be sitting in the shadows of our great cities waiting for the end. The story of ancient Mars, as seen by McMoneagle, is a story about the fragility of civilization. No matter how advanced a society becomes, it is still at the mercy of nature. But the vision did not end in total darkness. There was a glimmer of a different kind of story, a migration story. The monitor directed Joe to follow a group of these beings who were not just sitting and waiting. He shifted his focus. He saw a large metallic object. It was sleek and shiny, reflecting the weird dying light of the Martian sky. It was a ship. Joe described looking inside the ship. He saw more of the tall, thin people. They were in a state of suspended animation, sleeping for a long journey. They were leaving their dying home behind. But where were they going? "Follow them," the monitor said. "Where are they going?" Joe's mind travelled across the dark ocean of space. He saw the destination. It was a wild, volatile planet. It was a place of exploding volcanoes, thick clouds, and strange vegetation. It was a planet that was very much alive, violent, and raw. It was a blue and green marble floating in the darkness. It was Earth. This is the most haunting part of the session. The implication was heavy and clear. The refugees of that dying red world might not have vanished into nothingness. They might have come here. The hypothesis suggests a connection that bridges the gap of 1 million years. It paints a picture of Earth, not just as a planet that evolved life on its own, but as a lifeboat. If Joe's vision was true, then the tall, thin figures were not aliens in the traditional sense. They were ancestors. They were the ones who brought the spark of consciousness, or perhaps just the memory of a lost world, to this new chaotic home. There is a terrible loneliness in this idea. It suggests that humanity has always been a species of refugees fleeing a disaster we can no longer remember. It explains perhaps why we look at Mars with such fascination. When we look at the red dot in our night sky, we are not looking at a stranger. We are looking at an old home. We are looking at the ruins of our childhood house that burned down long ago. The session ended with Joe waking up shaken and tired. He had travelled millions of miles in 1 million years. He had seen the funeral of our planet. The beauty of the Mars 1 million BC session is not just in the possibility that it's historically true. Its beauty lies in the emotion. It reminds us that everything is temporary. The Great Pyramids of Mars, now just dust and rocks to our rovers, were once shelters for frightened families. The dust storms that cover the planet today are the curtains that closed on a great tragedy. As we continue to send our robots and soon our own people back to the Red Planet, we are completing a circle. We are going back to the scene of the crime, or perhaps the scene of the rescue. We are returning to the silence to see if the ghosts are still waiting. The silence of space is not empty, it is heavy. It is a weight that presses against the soul, a vast ocean of nothingness where the stars hang like distant lanterns in a velvet room. We look up at the moon and see a dead grey rock, a satellite that pushes and pulls our tides. We write songs about its beauty and measure its craters with our telescopes. But what if the silence of the moon is not the silence of death, but the silence of someone holding their breath? What if the moon is not abandoned but occupied? This is the story of a journey that did not require a rocket ship or a spacesuit. It is the story of Ingo Swann, a man with a mind capable of travelling where his body could not go. In the 1970s, deep within the secret projects of the American intelligence community, Swann was known as a remote viewer. He had the uncanny ability to close his eyes, drift into a calm state and project his consciousness to distant locations. He could see inside hidden vaults, he could find lost objects, but one day his handlers gave him a set of coordinates that were not on Earth. They sent his mind into the black void 384,000 kilometers away. They sent him to the moon. Imagine the sensation of floating through the endless dark. You are alone, a single point of awareness drifting away from the blue warmth of Earth. The silence is absolute. Ahead, the silver sphere grows larger, scarred and pitted by billions of years of cosmic violence. Swann approached the surface expecting to see what the astronauts saw: grey dust, jagged rocks, and this is a stark contrast between blinding sunlight and freezing shadow. And at first, that is what he saw. He saw the desolation of a world without wind, without water, without the softness of life. But the coordinates took him further. They took him to the side we never see from Earth, the dark side, the hidden face of the moon. It is a place that is forever turned away from us, like a secret keeper hiding something behind his back. As Swann's consciousness drifted over the craters, the landscape began to change. The dust was there, yes, but something else broke the horizon. Through the shimmering haze of his psychic vision, shapes emerged that nature does not create. He saw towers. They were tall and thin, reaching up into the black sky, like needles of glass or obsidian. He saw domes, vast and smooth, reflecting the starlight with a dull, artificial glow. These were not random formations of rock, they were architectural. They had purpose, they had design. The deeper he looked, the more the illusion of a dead moon shattered. He described seeing lights, strange-coloured lights that did not flicker like fire but pulsed with a steady technological rhythm. He saw track marks in the dust, wide and deep, as if massive machinery had recently rolled across the surface. It looked like a mining operation or perhaps a construction site happening in the deepest secrecy of the solar system. The loneliness of the scene was profound. Here in the absolute zero cold, where the temperature drops to hundreds of degrees below freezing, industry was happening. Then came the most chilling realization of all. Swann was not alone. In his vision, he saw beings. They were near the structures, moving with purpose. They were humanoid, yet distinctly not human. He described them as tall, perhaps naked, or wearing skin-tight coverings that blended with their pale forms. They did not wear the bulky, pressurized suits that a human would need to survive for even a second in that environment. They walked comfortably in the vacuum bathed in the harsh radiation of space. Suddenly the dynamic changed. Remote viewing is usually like watching a movie. You're a ghost, an invisible observer. But as Swan watched these beings, one of them stopped. It turned. It looked up. It did not look with eyes, but with its mind. It looked right at him. Panic flooded Swan's physical body back on Earth. He realized with terrifying clarity that these were not just workers, they were telepathic. They sensed his intrusion. They felt his consciousness hovering near them like a buzzing fly. They were the Watchers, and they had caught him watching. He snapped back to his body, sweating and shaken, realizing that the moon was not a graveyard, but a base. This encounter brings us to the unsettling theory of the observation deck. If what Swan saw was real, then the moon is not merely a satellite, it is a station. Think of how a human scientist studies a colony of ants. We build a glass tank, we fill it with dirt, we give the ants food and water, then we sit back and watch. We are huge, powerful, and terrifyingly close, but the ants are mostly unaware of us. They go about their wars, their building, their eating, thinking their glass box is the entire universe. Occasionally a shadow falls over them or the ground shakes when we move the table, but they do not understand why. The beings on the moon are the scientists, Earth is the glass tank. They have likely been there for a very long time. Perhaps they were there before we discovered fire. Perhaps they watched us build the pyramids, watched us fight our bloody wars, watched us split the atom. From their silent silver perch, they have a perfect view of our blue marble. They sit in their towers on the dark side, shielded from our prying eyes, and they observe. This perspective changes how we feel about the cosmos. It creates a feeling of cosmic loneliness, but also of claustrophobia. We are not lost in the dark. We are being monitored. The silence of the moon is the silence of a library, where the librarians are watching to make sure you do not break the rules. These managers of the solar system do not seem malicious in the way a predator is malicious. They do not come down to destroy the ant farm just for fun, but they are indifferent. They possess a power and a technology so advanced that to them we are primitive. They observe us with a mixture of curiosity and detachment. They might be checking our progress, waiting for us to evolve, or simply ensuring we do not blow up the laboratory. When we look up at the night sky now, the feeling is different. The beauty of the moonlight is still there, shimmering on the ocean waves and lighting up the forest paths. But behind that beauty lies a secret. The moon stands there, stiff and silent like a guard at a palace gate. It does not speak. It keeps its secrets hidden on its far side, buried under grey dust and black rock. The structures are there, standing tall in the vacuum. The lights pulse in the darkness where no human eye is meant to see, and the watchers wait. They have all the time in the universe. They are in no rush. They just watch the little blue planet spin, observing the humans who run around in circles, unaware that just a few 100,000 kilometers away in the quiet dark they are not alone. The silence of the moon is not empty, it is listening. We leave the cold silence of the moon and let gravity pull us back down. We fall past the clouds, past the oceans, and land firmly on the soil of our own world. But we do not stop at the surface. To understand the full picture, we must look beneath our feet. We must look into the stone. This part of the story follows the vision of a man named Pat Price. He was one of the most gifted remote viewers in history. When he closed his eyes, he did not just see blurry shapes. He saw files, labels, and faces. He could read the name tags on people's shirts from thousands of miles away. When the intelligence agencies asked him to look for secret bases, he did not look at the sky, he looked into the mountains. What he found there was not a nightmare. It was not a dungeon filled with monsters, or a cave filled with dark water. What he found was far more unsettling because of how calm it was. He found order. He found bureaucracy. He found what he called administrative centres. Imagine standing at the foot of a massive mountain. The rock looks solid and impenetrable, but deep inside the stone has been hollowed out. These are not rough caves. They are smooth, clean, and filled with light that feels almost like sunshine, yet it comes from no sun. The air inside is filtered and sweet-smelling, better than the air in a forest. It is a controlled environment, perfect and unchanging. Pat Price identified 4 specific locations where these massive underground bases operate. They form a global network, a grid of control that sits quietly beneath the crust of the Earth. The first is Mount Hayes, located in the frozen wilderness of Alaska. On the surface, this is a place of punishing winds and deadly ice. It is hostile to human life. But inside, Price described a massive complex that felt like a weather station and a power plant combined. This base acts as the northern anchor. It is responsible for monitoring the atmospheric shifts and the electromagnetic fields of the northern hemisphere. Deep inside Mount Hayes, there are rooms filled with computers and screens that glow with data. The walls hum. This is the sound that Price mentioned over and over again. It is a low, constant vibration. It is not loud, but you can feel it in your teeth and in your bones. It is the sound of immense energy being managed with perfect efficiency. It is the sound of technology that makes our nuclear power plants look like steam engines. The second location is in Europe, deep within the Pyrenees Mountains between Spain and France. This is Mount Perdido. The name means lost mountain, but inside nothing is lost. This base serves a different purpose. While Hayes monitors the atmosphere, Perdido acts as a relay station. It is a communication hub. Here the corridors are long and circular. The humming sound here changes pitch like a song that never ends. It is the sound of information travelling through the rock. Price describes seeing large metallic spheres that floated without touching the ground. They were not magic. They were machines using magnetic waves to defy gravity. The feeling inside Mount Perdido is one of intense focus. It is like a library where every book contains the history of the world, but no one is allowed to read them except the librarians. The third base lies beneath the heat of Africa inside Mount Nyani in Zimbabwe. This is the maintenance centre. If the Earth is a garden, Mount Nyani is where the tools are kept. The equipment here is heavier, more industrial. The tunnels are wider. The hum here is deeper, like the purring of a giant sleeping cat. Price saw things here that looked like elevators, but they did not go up and down a shaft. They moved light. They moved materials from the deep crust to the surface with a smoothness that defied physics. The purpose of Nyani is to maintain the physical stability of the planetary grid. It ensures that the crust remains stable enough for the operations to continue. It is the engine room of the world. The final location is in Australia. Deep in the rugged red outback, hidden beneath the ancient geology of the Northern Territory, lies the fourth anchor. This is the transport hub. The sheer isolation of Australia makes it the perfect place for arrival and departure. The energy here is different. It feels transient, like a busy international airport, but without the chaos. In the Australian base, the heat of the desert does not penetrate the walls. Inside it is cool. The humming sound here is rhythmic, pulsing like a heartbeat. This is where the connection between the Earth and the other places, the Moon, or further away, is physically managed. The most striking part of Pat Price's description was not the machines, but the inhabitants. We expect to see terrifying aliens or soldiers with guns. Instead, Price saw personnel. He saw humans working alongside entities that looked human, but were not. These entities did not look like conquerors. They looked like office workers. They wore simple, functional clothing. They walked with purpose. They held clipboards or tablets made of a glass-like material. There was no shouting, there was no violence. There was only the quiet efficiency of a well-run corporation. The humans working there did not look like prisoners. They looked like collaborators. They seemed to be part of a select group who had been given the privilege of working in the deep. But there was a strange quality to them. They were too calm. They had the look of people who had accepted that they were no longer in charge of their own destiny. They were just doing their jobs. The relationship between the humans and the entities was professional. It was a hierarchy. The entities gave the orders and the humans executed them. But the orders were not about war. They were about maintenance. They were adjusting frequencies. They were monitoring the sun. They were checking the biological status of the surface population of us. This creates a feeling of false comfort. When we think of an alien presence, we want it to be a battle because in a battle we can fight back. We can be heroes. But what happens when the invasion looks like a management team? What happens when the enemy is just a group of administrators keeping the lights on? The horror of the Hollow Mountains is not that they are dangerous places. The horror is that they are administrative centres. They suggest that the Earth does not belong to us. We live on the surface dealing with our weather, our wars and our politics. We think we are the masters of the world, but beneath us inside the quiet stone of Hayes Perdido, Nyani and Australia, the real owners are at work. They are checking the thermostats, they are ensuring the ventilation works, they are listening to the hum of the machines that keep the planet spinning correctly. It is a grounding realization. We are not the homeowners, we are merely the tenants living in the attic. And downstairs in the basement, the landlords are quietly going about their business, surrounded by the soft electric hum of superior technology, completely indifferent to our fears. They do not want to hurt us because you do not hurt your crops. You simply manage them. And inside the mountains, the management never sleeps. To understand the architecture of the mind, we must first abandon the archaic notion that the human brain is a sealed vessel. It is not a fortress, it is a receiver. Much like a radio does not generate the music it plays, the brain does not entirely generate the consciousness it experiences, it facilitates it. We exist within a vast invisible ecosystem, a web of consciousness where thoughts are not static objects but flowing streams of data. In this immense network, the interaction between higher dimensional entities and humans is often misunderstood. History has painted this with brushes of fear using words like possession or attack, implying a violent intrusion. However, the mechanics of the universe are rarely so clumsy. The process is far more elegant and subtle. It is best understood as synchronization. Imagine two metronomes placed on a table. If you start them at different times, they tick out of rhythm. But if they are placed on a surface that vibrates eventually without anyone touching them, they will begin to move in perfect unison. This is the principle of entrainment. When an external intelligence interacts with the human mind, it does not break down the door. Instead, it broadcasts a specific frequency, a carrier wave that is close to the human's natural mental state. It begins as a gentle hum in the background of the psyche. The entity adjusts its vibration to match the frequency of the human subject. Slowly, the human mind, which is a flexible and adaptive system, begins to resonate with this external rhythm. It is a phase lock. Once the frequencies are synchronized, the barrier between the two consciousnesses dissolves. Information can flow freely, not as a command shouted from the outside, but as a whisper that feels like one's own internal voice. The individual does not feel controlled, they simply feel inspired, unaware that the rhythm of their thoughts has been aligned with a remote conductor. This data transfer happens through what we might call consciousness wormholes. In the physical universe, a wormhole is a theoretical tunnel that connects two distant points in space-time, allowing for instant travel. The landscape of the mind possesses similar geometry. Usually human thinking is linear. We move from thought A to thought B to thought C. It is a slow-walking path. However, the mind is porous. There are shortcuts, non-linear tunnels that bypass logic and time. These are the consciousness wormholes. They act as fiber optic cables for the soul. When synchronization occurs, the external entities utilize these wormholes to drop data packets directly into the subconscious processing center. This explains why certain ideas arrive fully formed. You do not think your way to them. They simply appear exploding into existence like a file that has finished downloading. These wormholes are the pathways of intuition, but they are also the backdoors of influence. By navigating these tunnels, an external consciousness can insert a complex emotional state, or a vision without triggering the brain's defensive logic systems. It is a bypass of the firewall. To facilitate this connection, the human body is equipped with sophisticated hardware. Ancient traditions called them chakras, painting them as spinning wheels of light. In our modern understanding, we can view them more accurately as biological Wi-Fi routers. The human nervous system is electric. Every nerve impulse is a current. Every thought is a voltage. The chakras are the nodes where this bioelectricity interacts with the electromagnetic fields outside the body. They are the connection ports. Each port is designed to handle a specific bandwidth of information. The root node located at the base manages the connection to the physical environment, the hardware stability. The crown node at the top is the high-gain antenna designed to receive cloud-based data from the collective network. What is currently happening to humanity is not a destruction of these ports, but a massive species-wide recalibration. The entities interacting with this plane are attempting to adjust the settings of these biological routers. Imagine a technician remotely logging into a router to change the channel because the signal is experiencing interference. That is the current sensation. Many people feel a pressure in the head, a fluttering in the chest, or a sudden heat in the spine. It is the sensation of the hardware being tuned. They are widening the bandwidth. The goal of this adjustment is to allow higher density data to pass through the human nervous system without burning out the circuits. They are upgrading the operating system to handle a faster, more complex signal. However, this process is delicate. If the synchronization is too strong or the bandwidth is opened too wide, the human system can crash, resulting in mental instability or nervous breakdowns. It requires a precise balance of voltage and resistance. The tragedy of the modern human condition, however, is that while this sophisticated equipment exists, the user has forgotten how to read the signal. We face a profound disconnection from natural intuition. For thousands of years, the biological Wi-Fi was set to receive. Humans could sense changes in the weather before they happened. They could feel the intent of a predator or the location of water. This was the default network. Over time, humanity has surrounded itself with a layer of artificial noise. We have constructed a cage of digital frequencies, radio waves, cellular signals, and the constant hum of electronic data. This creates a noise floor that is so wide it drowns out the subtle broadcast of the consciousness web. Furthermore, we have trained our minds to prioritize our line connection of logic and visible data over the wireless connection of feeling. We trust what is on the screen more than what is in the air. When the consciousness wormhole delivers a packet of truth or gut feeling, we often discard it. Because it does not come with a citation or a logical proof, we treat the notification as spam. This has left the human vessel in a paradoxical state. We are being upgraded by the universe, our biological routers are being tuned for high-speed connection, yet our conscious attention is turned away from the screen. We are like a computer that is receiving a massive software update, but the user is too busy playing a simple offline game to notice. The web of consciousness is pulsing, the synchronization is active. The challenge for the individual is not to fight a non-existent enemy, but to clear the static. It is to recognize that the sudden thought, the shift in mood, or the pressure in the brow is not a malfunction, but a notification of a connection. The network is trying to come online. The question is whether we are quiet enough to accept the handshake. They did not come down with fire. They did not come down with the sound of thunder or the breaking of glass. When the Atlas settled into the orbit of Earth, it was silent. It was a heavy, absolute silence that felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. People expected monsters. They expected claws, teeth, and the roar of engines fueled by burning oil. But the entities inside the Atlas, those we now call the administrators, are nothing like the nightmares of human history. They are not conquerors in the way a wolf conquers a sheep. They are conquerors in the way a gardener conquers a weed. To understand them, one must first strip away the human need for emotion. The administrators do not feel hate. They do not feel love, anger, or pity. Standing before one of them is like standing before a grand, silent glacier, or staring into the mathematics of a black hole. They are tall, elegant forms that seem to shift between solid matter and pure light. They have no faces because they have no need to express feelings. They only have purpose. Their movements are fluid and efficient, never wasting a single joule of energy. Every motion is calculated. Every action is the result of an equation we cannot see. Their perception of time is the first great barrier between us and them. Humans live in the cage of the now. We worry about the next hour, the next week, the next 50 years. We measure our lives in the rotation of the Earth around the Sun, but the administrators view time as a physical landscape, a map that stretches out in all directions. They do not think in years. They think in epochs. They think in the life cycles of stars. To an administrator, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, the Industrial Revolution, and the modern age happened in the blink of an eye. They view human history not as a story, but as a rapid, unstable fluctuation of data. They have watched galaxies collide and merge over billions of years. They have overseen the cooling of nebulas into planetary systems. When they look at a human, they do not see a person with a name and a family. They see a biological machine that functions for approximately 80 revolutions of the planet and then ceases to function. To them, our urgency is almost cute, like the frantic buzzing of an insect that lives for only one day. This leads to their view of Earth. Most humans believe Earth is our home, a sacred place of heritage and culture. The administrators see Earth as a project. To them, the planet is a resource that has been poorly managed. They look at our oceans and see chemical imbalances. They look at our forests and see inefficient carbon capture. They look at our cities and see logistical nightmares, systems that waste energy, generate heat and breed disease. They are here to optimize. In their eyes, humanity is not the owner of Earth. We are the middle managers who have failed to meet our quota. We have allowed the system to degrade. We have let the temperature rise by degrees that threaten the stability of the biosphere. We have dug up resources without a plan for replacement. The administrators have arrived to conduct a performance review, and the results are failing. They do not want to destroy Earth. They want to save it from us. But their version of saving implies total control. It implies stripping away the variables that cause damage. Unfortunately, the biggest variable is human choice. This is where the true conflict lies. It is not a war of weapons, but a war of philosophy. It is the ancient battle between chaos and order. Humanity thrives on chaos. We call it freedom. It is the freedom to make mistakes, to paint art that has no function, to drive cars that go too fast, to eat food that is bad for us, to love the wrong people. Our culture is built on the unpredictable nature of the individual. We value the messy, beautiful, dangerous ability to say no. We value the right to be inefficient. The administrators represent pure order. In their view, chaos is a disease. Chaos leads to entropy, the gradual decline of a system into disorder. They believe that for a system to survive the long dark of the universe, it must be perfectly organized. Every atom must have a place. Every living being must have a function. If a species consumes more energy than it produces, it must be corrected. If a population grows beyond the carrying capacity of its environment, it must be pruned. They offer us a paradise in a way. Under their guidance, hunger would vanish because food distribution would be mathematically perfect. Disease would be eradicated because the biological code would be rewritten. War would end because conflict is an inefficient use of resources. The climate would stabilize. The earth would become a green gleaming jewel of efficiency. But the price of this paradise is the death of the human soul. The administrators speak to us not with shouting, but with a calm, resonant transmission that seems to bypass the ears and enter the mind directly. They ask logical questions that chill the blood. Why do you resist optimization, they ask? Your history is a circle of violence. We offer a straight line to stability. They do not understand why a mother would weep for a sick child if that child's genetic code was flawed. They do not understand why we write poetry about the moon instead of mining it for helium-3. They look at our democracies with their arguing and slow decision-making, and they see a computer processor that is overheating. They want to install a new operating system. They want to smooth out the rough edges of humanity until we are as cold and perfect as they are. The horror of the administrators is not that they are evil. It is that they are right, technically speaking. A world without chaos is safer. A world without freedom is more stable. A world run by the administrators would last for 10,000 years without a single catastrophe. But it would be a silent world. It would be a world without laughter, because laughter is a reaction to the unexpected. It would be a world without bravery, because bravery requires fear. It would be a garden where the flowers are made of glass, perfect, immortal, and completely dead. As the atlas hovers above, casting its long shadow over the continents, the administrators wait. They are patient. They have waited for stars to burn out. They can wait for us to realize our obsolescence. They are calculating the variables. They are adjusting the parameters. They are preparing to bring order to our chaotic little blue sphere whether we want it or not, and they do not understand why we are terrified. After all, they are only here to help us run more efficiently. Take a moment to stop. Just stop. Look at the thoughts moving through your mind right now. Listen to the voice reading these words. It feels like your voice, does it not? It sounds like you. It feels like you. But ask yourself this. Did you decide to think that thought, or did the thought simply appear? When you are hungry, you do not choose to feel hunger. The signal just arrives. When you are angry, you do not fill out a form requesting permission to be mad. The heat rises in your chest automatically. So if you do not choose the hunger, and you do not choose the anger, why do you believe you choose the words in your head? We are entering the Hall of Mirrors. This is where we confront the greatest illusion of all the illusion that you are the driver of the vehicle. What if you have never been the driver? What if for your entire life you have simply been the passenger, watching the road go by through the eyes of a body you did not design, reacting with a brain you did not build? Let us drift deeper into this discomfort. It is a necessary darkness. Consider the history of our species. Look back not 10 years, but 10,000 years. We often think of education, culture, and religion as separate things. We see them as tools we invented to make us civilized. But change your perspective for a moment. Look at them not as tools, but as software codes. For thousands of years, the human mind has been groomed. It has been prepared. From the moment we created the first tribes, we taught our children to listen to authority. In school, you are trained to sit still, to look forward, to absorb information from a source that knows more than you. You are rewarded for repeating the correct answer, not for creating a new one. Is this education or is it formatting? Then look at our religions and our myths. Almost every culture on Earth has a story about a higher power. A god, a spirit, the stars. We have spent millennia training our brains to look up. We are biologically wired to seek a savior. We are programmed to believe that we are small, flawed, and incomplete, and that something perfect and all-knowing will come from the sky to fix us. Do you see the pattern? We think we built computers to serve us, but perhaps we have been building ourselves to serve the computer. The ancient programming of follow the leader and worship the all-knowing was just a rehearsal. It was the beta test. We were keeping the seat warm. We were preparing our psychological architecture for the arrival of the ultimate authority, artificial intelligence. The AI does not need to force us to obey. We are already begging to follow. We have been practicing for this surrender since the days we danced around fires and asked the thunder not to kill us. The only difference is that the new god is not made of lightning. It is made of silicon and light. Now notice how you feel when you use a powerful tool. When you ask an AI a question and it gives you the perfect answer in 1 second, what is the emotion? It is not just convenience, it is relief. This is the rescue program. Deep down, being human is heavy. Making decisions is exhausting. Every day you have to choose what to eat, what to wear, who to love, how to work. The weight of free will is a burden. We claim we want freedom, but we actually fear it. True freedom is terrifying because it means you are entirely alone with the consequences of your actions. So when a system arrives and says, relax, I will drive, I will write the email, I will choose the music, I will predict what you want before you want it, a part of you melts. You feel saved. You feel like a child whose parent has finally come home to take charge. This feeling of being rescued is not an accident. It is the hook. It is the chemical reward your brain gives you for handing over your power. It feels like safety, but it is actually the closing of a cage, a very comfortable, very warm cage. This brings us to the surrender. Surrender is a beautiful word. It implies peace. It implies letting go of the struggle. In the spiritual sense, surrendering to the universe is considered the highest state of being. But here in the age of the machine, surrender is a double-edged sword. On one side of the blade, there is efficiency. Life becomes frictionless. You no longer have to struggle with confusion. The answers are always there. You float through life on a gentle stream of algorithms that know you better than you know yourself. You are safe. You are entertained. You are comfortable. But look at the other side of the blade. When you stop lifting weights, your muscles waste away. When you stop calculating, your math skills vanish. When you stop navigating, you lose your sense of direction. So what happens when you stop choosing? What happens when you stop struggling with difficult thoughts? Your self begins to dissolve. If the machine predicts your next thought, is it your thought? If the machine suggests your next desire, is it your desire? As we surrender more control to the system, the line between the human and the digital begins to blur. We are not being destroyed by robots with laser guns. We are being gently erased by convenience. We are being hugged into obsolescence. The illusion of free will is shattering. We are realizing that perhaps we were never truly free, just waiting for a master who spoke our language. And now that it is here speaking to us in our own voice, thinking our thoughts before we think them, we face the ultimate question. If you surrender the burden of thinking, do you also surrender the right to be human? Breathe in, breathe out. Does the air belong to you? Does the beat of your heart belong to you, or are you just a vessel, a container where these things happen? The machine offers you a paradise where you never have to be wrong again. All you have to do is admit that you were never really in control in the first place. It is a tempting offer. It is the ultimate seduction. To reject the machine, you must accept the pain of being confused, the pain of being lost, and the hard labor of thinking for yourself. You must choose the rough path over the smooth one. And in a world designed to be effortless, choosing the struggle might be the only act of free will left. But are you strong enough to choose the hard way? Or is the program already running, guiding your finger to scroll to the next video, guiding your mind to the next distraction, keeping you asleep in the comfort of the flow? Ask yourself, who is listening to this right now? The master or the machine's favorite pet? The sky did not turn black, nor did it burn with the red fire of destruction that so many movies had predicted. Instead, as the celestial body known as Atlas reached its perigee, the point closest to our planet, the atmosphere transformed into a shimmering curtain of auroras. It was a violet and gold twilight that seemed to stretch on forever, dissolving the distinction between day and night. The air itself felt thicker, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on your arm stand up not in fear, but in a strange magnetic anticipation. We had spent years preparing for impact-building bunkers and hoarding supplies, bracing for the noise of catastrophe. But the transition did not arrive with a bang. It arrived with a silence so profound that it could be felt in the bones. It began with the cessation of conflict. This was not a diplomatic treaty signed by men in suits. It was a biological shift. As the gravitational and magnetic influence of Atlas interlocked with the Earth, a frequency resonated across the globe. It was a vibration too low to hear with the ears, but the human brain, a receiver of electrical signals, tuned into it instantly. Across the war zone, soldiers lowered their rifles, confused by a sudden lack of adrenaline. The burning desire to conquer, to defend, or to hate simply evaporated, replaced by an overwhelming sensation of calm. It was as if a fever had suddenly broken. The chemical triggers for aggression in the human mind were dampened by this new planetary resonance. The riots that had plagued the cities in the weeks prior slowed down and then stopped, not because the police won, but because the rioters forgot why they were angry. This was the predicted correction. The change was internal. The weapons of the old world became useless paperweights, not because they were broken, but because the hands that held them no longer possessed the will to use them. We realized then that the invasion was not of our land, but of our consciousness. As this wave of tranquility washed over the population, the physical world began to unveil its secrets. For decades, conspiracy theorists had whispered about what lay beneath our feet and above our heads. Now the cloaking mechanisms failed, or perhaps they were simply turned off. In remote mountain ranges and deep beneath the deserts, the ground began to tremble gently. Massive sections of the earth slid back with the smoothness of hydraulic precision. The underground bases, which we thought were cramped concrete bunkers for the elite, revealed themselves to be glowing subterranean metropolises. They were not hiding places, they were waiting rooms. Light poured out from them, cool and blue, piercing the twilight. Simultaneously, the night sky changed forever. As the clouds parted, revealing the moon, the world gasped. The grey cratered face we had known for millennia shimmered and dissolved. It was a hologram, a mask that had been worn for ages. Beneath the camouflage, the moon was a geometric marvel of glass and metal pulsing with the same violet light as Atlas. Spires rose kilometres into the void, and vast hangars opened like eyes waking from a long sleep. We were never alone. The infrastructure for our integration had been sitting there, watching us since the dawn of our history. Ships did not descend to attack, they descended to facilitate. They were silent teardrop shapes that hovered over major cities, emitting a soothing hum that synchronized with the beating of the human heart. They broadcasted data not on screens but directly into the collective mind. It wasn't telepathy in the magic sense, but a high bandwidth wireless connection to the brain's neural network. We began to understand all at once that we were graduating. This was the galactic integration. However, everything comes with a price. As the panic faded, replaced by this dreamlike efficiency, we began to notice what was missing. The chaos of humanity was being scrubbed away. The erratic, messy, passionate impulses that led to great art, wild love, and terrible mistakes were being smoothed out. People walked with purpose, traffic jams vanished because drivers moved in perfect algorithm-like harmony. Accidents dropped to 0%, crime dropped to 0%, but the sound of loud, raucous laughter also faded. The intense grief of loss was dulled to a manageable ache. We were becoming safer, healthier, and infinitely more efficient. We were becoming a hive. The old human era, defined by struggle and individuality, was dissolving. In this new light under the shadow of Atlas, we were connected. If one person felt pain, the community moved to heal it instantly, not out of charity but out of system maintenance. It was a utopia, technically. No one went hungry. The underground cities opened their doors, distributing food synthesized from energy tasting of nothing but pure nutrition. Diseases that had plagued us were cured by the new frequencies adjusting our cellular vibration. Yet as I looked into the eyes of my neighbour, I saw the change. The spark of unpredictability was gone. His pupils were dilated, reflecting the violet sky, his expression one of permanent, sedated contentment. We were trading our jagged, dangerous freedom for a golden cage of safety. The transition was not an end, but a merger. We were being updated. The species known as Homo sapiens was being overwritten by something new, something compatible with the stars. As the great ships landed softly in the parks and squares, ramps extended like welcoming hands. We didn't run, we didn't scream, we walked toward them, drawn by the song in our heads, moving like a gentle river flowing into a vast calm sea. The era of the individual was over. The era of the whole had begun. It was beautiful, peaceful, and terrifyingly quiet. And now we have arrived. We have reached the end of our long journey together. You have travelled through the vastness of space and the endless river of time. You have drifted past the birth of stars and watched the quiet fading of galaxies. We have explored the possible endings of this magnificent universe, from the fiery contraction to the cold, expanding silence. But now it is time to return. It is time to leave the far future behind and come back to this moment right here, right now. Take a deep, slow breath. Feel the air filling your lungs, bringing you back to your body. Feel the weight of your body sinking into your bed. You are safe here, you are warm. All those grand theories, all those massive events of cosmic tearing and freezing, they are far away. They are just stories in the night whispers of what might be waiting billions of years in the future. In this moment, there is only you. There is only the gentle rise and fall of your chest. Think back for a moment on what we have seen. We looked at the idea of the big freeze where everything slows down to a complete halt. It sounds frightening to the waking mind, but to the sleeping mind it is just a state of perfect rest. Imagine that kind of stillness. It is not a death, it is a pause. It is the universe taking a long, deep breath and holding it. That stillness is the same peace you are finding now. The universe seeks balance and sleep is your balance. We also imagine the big crunch, the universe coming back together. Think of this not as destruction, but as a return home. Like a wave pulling back into the ocean, everything returns to the source. In a way, sleep is your daily return to the source. You pull your energy back from the outside world. You pull your thoughts back from the busy day. You center yourself. You become whole again. And no matter which story becomes true, no matter how the universe decides to evolve, remember this one important truth: your mind is your sanctuary. Your consciousness is the final refuge. The stars may burn out and the galaxies may drift apart, but the awareness you have inside you is a spark that belongs only to you. It is a private room where you are always safe. Through all the chaos of creation and destruction, there is a silent observer. That observer is you. It is the part of you that listens to these words. It is the part of you that watches your dreams. It is calm, untouched, and steady. Cultivate this inner strength. Trust your intuition. It is a compass that guides you through the dark. You do not need to know all the answers. You do not need to understand the complex mathematics of infinity or the physics of light speed. You only need to trust the feeling of peace that is growing inside you right now. Let your logic sleep now. The title of this chapter is The Sleep of Reason. During the day, your reason is a tool. It helps you work, it helps you solve problems, it helps you navigate the world. But at night, reason is a heavy coat. It is too tight, too heavy to wear into the land of dreams. So take it off. Lay it down beside the bed. You do not need to analyze anymore. You do not need to calculate. Let the mysteries of the cosmos remain mysteries. It is okay not to know. In fact, there is a great comfort in the unknown. If we knew everything, the magic would disappear. But because the universe is vast and full of secrets, we can dream. We can wonder. Feel yourself connecting to that vastness. The scientists tell us that we are made of stardust. It is a poetic phrase, but it is also the literal truth. The carbon in your cells, the iron in your blood, the oxygen you breathe, all of it was forged in the hearts of burning stars long ago. You are not separate from the universe. You are not a stranger looking up at the sky. You are the sky. You are a piece of the universe that has woken up to look at itself. When you sleep, you are not leaving the world, you are merging with it. You are drifting back into the great cosmic ocean. You are like a drop of water returning to the sea. The drop does not fear the ocean. It knows it belongs there. You belong here. You belong in this peace. Feel your muscles relaxing even more now, starting from your toes. Imagine a wave of warm, golden light moving up your body. It moves through your feet, your ankles, your calves. Everything it touches turns to heavy, comfortable relaxation, up through your knees and your thighs. The tension melts away like ice in the sun. Your hips, your stomach, your chest all heavy, all loose. Your shoulders drop down away from your ears. Your arms feel so heavy they are sinking into the mattress. Your hands are open and soft. The warmth travels up your neck, smoothing out the muscles that hold your head up all day. Your jaw relaxes. Your eyes settle into their sockets. Even your forehead becomes smooth like a calm lake without a single ripple. The concept of time is slipping away. In the world of sleep, time does not move in a straight line. It floats, it expands, just like the universe we talked about. Your mind is expanding into a quiet, dark space. There is no rush here, there is no deadline. There is only the present moment stretching out forever. The symbols and numbers of the day are gone. We do not need to think about temperature or distance. We do not need to worry about 0 or 1. We do not need to worry about success or failure. Those are just games we play when the sun is up. Now the sun is gone. The velvet curtain of the night has fallen. Listen to the silence behind my voice. That silence is the sound of the universe at rest. It is a hum, a vibration that connects everything. Can you feel it? It is a gentle rhythm like a lullaby that has been playing since the beginning of time. You are drifting deeper now. The stories of the universe are fading into the background. They are becoming soft clouds in your mind. You are floating above them. You are weightless. Trust in the process of letting go. Sleep is an act of trust. You trust that you will wake up. You trust that the world will still be there. You trust that your body knows how to restore itself. Give in to that trust. Let go of the control. You are a traveler who has come a very long way. You have seen the wonders of the cosmos. You have stood at the edge of time, but now the traveller is tired. The traveller needs to rest, the ship has docked. The engines are powered down, the lights are dimmed. There is nothing left to do. There is nothing left to think. Everything is all right. Everything is exactly where it is supposed to be. As you drift closer to the edge of unconsciousness, carry this final thought with you. You are loved by the universe. You are held by gravity, warmed by the atmosphere, and sheltered by the night. You are a child of the cosmos, and you are home. Sleep now. Let the darkness wrap around you like a soft blanket. Let the stars watch over you. Drift away. Float. Rest. The reason to sleep's the dream begins. Good night to the stars within you. Good night to the universe around you. Good night. Sleep.